What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at writing a chorale passage with woodwinds, and also we'll be doing an example with brass as well. But I used to play the woodwinds a little bit. I played flute and piccolo in my high school, and so that, when I first started the flute, it took me a lot of air. I actually had a lot of trouble. But then as I continued to grow and my lungs expanded a little bit, it became easier to play. So, I get this question all the time, like, is it necessary to play an instrument to kind of be able to write for it or orchestrate for it? And there's some truth to that. I think it is a good idea to play those instruments, but, I don't think it's a necessity to be able to do so. I think as long as you know how the instrument works and, the limitations of the instrument, then you can at least try to write for that instrument. But anyway, what I thought we'd do is come up with a nice little chord progression here and put a melody on top, and then we'll bring in basically all the standard woodwinds of the orchestral section. So we have flutes 1 and 2, and oboes 1 and 2, clarinets 1 and 2, bassoons 1 and 2. I brought in the pairs for each just because, like, in case I want to add more additional voices with the chords, I have that option. But let's just start with a chord progression here. So I'm thinking something like E flat major. Let's see if we have a good tempo. So 120 works. Here we go. Cool. So something kind of nice and chorale. Now, first thing I want to think of when I'm orchestrating is, what are the particular ranges of these instruments? Like, where do they shine the best, right? Just to remove any confusion, I'm actually going to just delete these for now, these extra tracks we're not using. So let's zoom in just a touch here. Cool. Okay, so yes, the first question to ask is, like, what is the range of these instruments? Now, we know that the flute is the highest one because the flute can really go up to that high C. I mean, it could go even higher if you wanted to, but the practical range is pretty much a high C to a high G, and you could go above that, but you don't really need to. And the lowest note of the flute is around middle C, and even the B below. Some flutes have that extension key, so we kind of know where the limits of the flute lie, right? So it's kind of middle C up to a really high C. So that's good to know. Let's see the oboe. First of all, let's take a look at, by the way, if you look at the flute range here, starts on middle C, goes to that high C right there. Now, if we go to oboe and click on it, you see the range moves down a little bit. So the lowest note of this oboe that's recorded is this B flat right there. So the B flat below middle C. Let's go up a couple octaves. So they recorded up to this high G, which is actually quite high, but I don't really think I'll be writing up to that register anyway. For me, where the oboe really shines is kind of in the register starting from the C above middle C to the C above that. So in this octave is where I think it really shines. And then I can have the second oboe for more support. The clarinet, on the other hand, its range can start from like this D, right? Which is just above the C below middle C. And then it can go up to even higher than this, honestly, but like that's already a pretty large range for the clarinet. So 1 octave, 2 octaves, 3 octaves. We have a range of 3 octaves for this clarinet, which is really good to know. And then finally, if we take a look at the bassoon, again, you'll see the range drop down, and the lowest note here we have is a B flat. So that's this B flat over here. And then this C is 2 C's below middle C. So the C right above that, here's middle C, and then we have this C right there, which is above middle C, okay? So this is all good to know. Basically, it's been arranged in terms of register, okay? Let's start out here. Let's kind of hear this again. Okay, so the register I played this melody in is basically around the middle C register, like just above it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the flute take the main melody, but I also want to give it additional support because the flute, knowing the timbral characteristics, is very light and it can very easily be drowned out, especially if it's not in its higher register. So the flute's going to take this register, but also I want to double it with a stronger woodwind instrument like the oboe. So let's see how this turns out. Now, by the way, this will sound relatively pleasing just because the characteristics of both of these instruments are very different. Like the flute has a warmer and airy sound, while the oboe has a slightly more thin and reedy sound. So combining those together will create kind of a unique timbre. So let's play the flute first. Here we go. Cool. Notice if you take a look at the MIDI here, I've also left in some breath marks. So that's very important for the woodwind instruments and the brass instruments. You need to give them places to breathe. So here I played a note wrong there. So make sure we have that there. And then here I can give them a little more of a place to breathe, just like that. Okay, now I'm just thinking here, in the second half of this theme, I really like how it sounds, but again, everything is within like the middle C to the higher C register. But the flute, again, really shines in the upper register. Maybe we want to take the second half of the theme. Maybe let's raise it up an octave. Because then, if we have a listen now. Okay, actually, let's record the oboe now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to layer it in unison with the flute one, but then I'm going to layer it in an octave below for the second half because the flute has now been raised up an octave in the second half of the theme. So here we go. So you hear those timbres combining. The reedy tone with the oboe, with the flute. Cool. Now let's just say on that very last chord, I do want it to go have a little bit of harmony. So I know the last chord is an E flat major 7. Let's see if we go to a D. Right? Just has this nice contrast. You know, I think that kind of fits there. Okay, nice. So now that we have the melody covered, we can start with the harmony. Let's do the bassoon first. Let's start with the Bassoon One, which will take the basic harmony line, the fundamental bass notes. So I already know the progression here. Nice. Now that I have a basic sense of, you know, the theme here, I'm just gonna mute the piano. I don't think I need it anymore. So let's hear what we have here. We have a basic shell. We have the bass notes, which is implying the harmony, and then we have the melody on top with the flute and the oboe doubled together. So we take a look at the MIDI. So we have this middle register that hasn't been filled up yet. And according to the harmonic series, we still have, yeah, like there's definitely things we can fill in here, but not too much. Now, if I wanted to, I could fill in this register more because we're higher up in the harmonic series now. And here we have our 3 notes. This is the part where we actually hear all three voices individually, which is nice. Cool, let's move on. Let's throw in the clarinet. So my goal with this first clarinet is to fill in the gap between this oboe line and this bassoon line. Because we know the clarinet, like its mid-range is kind of set between the oboe and the bassoon, right? So let's see what we can do here. It'll have a nice tone contrast as well, timbre contrast. Okay, and we're just going to fix a couple notes here. So here, I basically held the clarinet an extra half note there, or a quarter note, and then I let it go down to the passing note after that. Dominant seventh. Here, I can just follow the motion of the melody, so go up, maintain the interval of a sixth. This is really nice. Now we know that intervals of sixths create really consonant, beautiful sounding harmonies. Here, let's see. Here, we can actually start the B a little bit earlier. Hold the C, breathe. And that's nice. Cool. All right, so we definitely have more work to do. We still have 4 more instruments to pull in. Let's see if we can fill in the rest of the chord tones using these supporting instruments now. So the main thing I've done here so far is flute 1 and oboe 1 are carrying the melody, because the oboe kind of needs to support the flutes in its lower register, and then it gives that middle range support when the flute goes higher. The bassoon's role is playing the harmonic role, and the clarinet's role is filling in the gap so far between the oboe and the bassoon. Now we have the secondary instruments to complete that harmonic job even further. So this is going to be really nice. I take a look at what we're playing here. We have G, F, E flat, right? So, oops, sorry about that. What I could do is, because now that the flute is already quite low, because again, the lowest note on the flute is typically a middle C. So this first note in the melody is already a G, so that's a perfect fifth above middle C. But if I go any lower than that, it's going to be kind of hard for the flute to speak at all. So one option is to go above the first flute. I could do that. Or I could just go below it in the third and just make sure I don't go below middle C. Why don't we try that option first and see how that works? And if it doesn't work, I can make the line above the flute. The only problem is that our ear tends to hear the highest note as the melody. So if that's the case, the second flute's going to have to play really, really quietly if I write this line above the first line, the first flute. So let's give it a shot below first. Here we go. So first of all, I definitely think going a third below works, because if we just compare flutes 1 and 2, we see we have this third, this E flat and G flat, sorry, E flat and G, D and F, E flat and C. So I'm already at the limit on the lowest note of the flute there. So I can't go any lower than that. I know that's my limit. I can only go up from there, and it works perfectly actually. I can go up with the first flute there. And now here, I started on an A flat with this F because I'm playing a D half diminished 7, but I realized I had a chord tone that was even closer to the first flute, so I could have just used the C, which I then changed to halfway through the phrase once I realized my mistake. So then I chose the C, and I wanted to keep the flute 2 relatively tight to the first flute. because of the harmonic series, allows for closer proximity of the higher voices. So have a listen to this. Now, according to traditional voice leading, I would have went up to E flat because that's the next closest chord tone in C minor, but the first flute is already playing the E flat, and so is the oboe. So I just decided to go down to C to give that interval of a third there, right? So C minor, hold the C for the F chord, hold it for the F minor chord, rise up, and then E flat. Now E flat, I could have done, I did E flat, but then I changed my mind and went to G because I wanted a third below that B flat. Again, I'm trying to keep it tight, so I'm going to go here and I'm actually going to extend my G and replace the E flat. Kind of like that. Let me hear that one more time. Yeah. The C and the D are pretty much the closest I can get to the F and the G in the flute one. So those are a fourth apart. Those sound a little bit iffy, but you know, that's the way it is. Cool. So if we now take a look at the upper register, we basically have a perfect classical voice leading. You know, the voices are going as smoothly as possible to their next notes. Let's move on to the oboe 2. Now let's take a look at the distance between our oboe 1 and our clarinet 1. So what do we have here? So yeah, let me see if I can if it's possible to solo oboe 1 and clarinet 1. Solo and solo? What, does that cancel out that solo? Yeah, it does. Okay, maybe I can unmute it. No, okay, that's fine. I'm just gonna play this here. So I have G and B flat. So basically these are separated by sixth mostly, and then here they're closer together, right? So let's see what we can do. The oboe 2 can try to close the gap between these two instruments. The really cool thing though is that we can interlace. So like the oboe 2 can kind of go above oboe 1, but it can also go below the clarinet 1. It's very flexible. In this case, let's keep it one homogeneous body of sound. Let's keep it very structured and traditional here. So if I have G on the top and B flat in the clarinet, what's a logical note to go with? Well, E flat, which would be the root, or D, which would be the seventh. So if we let me hear the first chord. Okay, let's try E flat first. Let's try D first. Let's see how that would sound in E flat major 7. Nope, doesn't work. I want to start with an E flat. Okay, so this is where playing by ear is actually a lot of fun because you don't know exactly what you've played so far unless you kind of go back and compare the lines. But I just want to see if I've overlapped any notes by accident here from oboe 2 to clarinet 1. So we have E flat, B flat, D, A flat, C, and G. Actually, I'll pull in the oboe 1 as well. So far we have all three different notes, which is good. This is E flat. We have A flat and G. Let me hear this. So this A flat. Ah, okay, so I can't go that low actually. The lowest note is a B flat there. So here I'm actually going to go back up to a C. And then maybe go to D. There we go. So follow the melodic line essentially. There we go. Now there, I thought I'd be a little sneaky and sneak up to a high G to kind of meet the Oboe 1, but it just ended up sounding not so good. And this is kind of a general rule that I can learn from as well. It's like not to play two oboes in unison because the readiness of the quality of the instruments just tends to be a little bit grating on the ears. So you want to avoid, oops, not deleting the entire track, just take out that note there. So after this E flat, I'll give him some room to breathe. 2, 3, 4. There we go. Okay, now let's compare. So we have, I basically have an F on this oboe and then A flat. So that means this should go to a C, because that's filling in the gap in the D half diminished 7. How about the actual D? Do I have the... Okay, that's fine. What if I went from C down to B natural? I feel like I already have another B natural there. See, the B is already in the clarinet. Let's go up to D actually. I went down to C and then up to F. So here we have the C already. So let's go up to E flat. Let's see. But we already have this E flat there. Okay, so then here we have a little bit of a problem, right? Because then we either have like both oboes playing an E flat, or the oboe comes down to meet the clarinet on the C. So why don't we actually do the second oboe going above the first oboe? But in real performance, it would have to be a little bit quieter. You hear that? And then I'm also going to make this G, I'm going to make this note after the G go up to an A. Right. And so the reason I can do something like this is because on the instructions in the performer's book, I could actually write down play quieter, or like MP for these couple notes here. And this will allow the flute, which is in the higher register in its melody, to come out a little bit more. Right? And so the ear still hears the flute 1 as the melody, even though oboe 2 is overstepping oboe 1 a little bit here. Cool. So and if I just take a look at these here again, looks like so oboe 2 is moving down to meet clarinet, which is not ideal. Let's see. Then let's do this. Oboe 2. Let's put it above oboe 1. Actually, no, I can't do that. There's a minor second. Let's do B flat. Let's try B flat. There we go. And then here I have a B flat. Okay, so this now this oboe is dropping down from this B flat down an octave. Or oboe 1 is going up to that D. So I could just leave this oboe playing that B flat. Yeah, that works. The only thing I'm missing now in this last chord is a bit of thickness and richness over here, right? So you know what? I'm just for thickness sake, let's throw in the clarinet 2 now and see what we're missing. So far we have. Now, do you see how the register is already pretty well filled up? We have a nice distribution at the bottom, like wider at the bottom and then closer at the top, right? And then here near to the end, we actually have more of a gap at the bottom. So visually and audibly, I like how this beginning sounds. So I'm not going to put in the clarinet 2 there because I think it would just take up extra space that doesn't need to be taken up. Instead, I'm going to start listening from the second half and see what I can fill up in this register, in this area here, because again, we have more of a gap there, so we can fill that up a little more. Oops, sorry about that. How dare you, clarinet. So that is C there, there's a C there. There's a big gap here, so let's see what the clarinet can do. Starts on an A flat, this starts on a D. So let's try an F in the middle then. Why not? Okay, let's tweak the notes a bit. Okay, so here, throwing in that F, do you hear how it clogs up everything just a little bit? And that's because F is actually the third of the D half diminished 7. And we already talked about in the previous video how we don't want to have the third of the chord too low in the distribution. So instead, I'm going to have it go up to a C, because C is the 7th, which doesn't clog it up as much. And now I can go down to the G, because G is actually the root of the G chord, of the G7 chord. So doubling the root is totally fine. In fact, that's the note we usually double first. So leave the G, keep the G, just go down to F there, right? And now here, actually, let's see what happens if we put the G up to an A flat to create a B flat dominant 7 sound. Yeah, that's much better. Let's see what we have. Yeah, so this A flat is only being taken up by this second clarinet. So if we double the 7th here, that wouldn't sound so good in a dominant 7th. So only one of the 7th notes is good there. Then we have E flat, B flat, and E. But we already have B flat up here, don't we? We already have the 5th. Right there. So that, I think the first oboe was playing that. So what I'm going to do, instead of doing the B flat, let's actually see what happens if we bring out the C instead. See, as an ending chord, the 6th chord doesn't sound as nice, unless the C was played a lot quieter. Let's try on the D instead. Let's get this major 7 sound. Are there any other instruments playing that D? No, there are not, but we have this D and the E flat clashing there, so we don't want that. Let's put it back to the B flat actually then. Because again, looking at it, this is the gap that needs a bit of filling. Right? So then I look at this and I say, okay, well, what other chord notes can I have? Oops. What did I just do? There. So if I just listen. So here we have a really nice E flat major 7 chord already. E flat, B flat, D, and G. So below that we have B flat and E flat. I don't want to put in a G here because that's already too low. So putting in the third of this chord is not a good idea. But what I could do is put another E flat down an octave because that would give him more support. And I already have this bassoon 2 ready to do something. So why not just let him do that in this case? So let me hear this. There we go. And the bassoon 2 is doing that support, which is very nice. Because the first bassoon is already going low enough. I don't want this piece to be too low. Right? Now listen to what happens if I move this E flat in the first bassoon down to a D. Listen to what this would sound like. Right? So it doesn't sound very nice. Generally, dissonances, when they're lower, also don't sound quite as good. In the harmonic series, we want to have these large gaps of octaves and then fifths, and then thirds are okay as well. but again, make those higher up. You can have the occasional fourth, but the wider the gap, usually the better, but exclude sixths and sevenths because those are much, much more colorful. The sevenths especially are more dissonant. The sixths have a lot of color in them. So whatever has a lot of color, you just want to reserve them for higher registers. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's an example of the woodwinds, and I'm going to export the MIDI for this as well. So you can find the MIDI for this project in the description box below. So let me quickly do that. Actually, I guess maybe I have to highlight them all. Export selection as MIDI file. Winds brass chorale. Okay. Now, just for fun, let's see how this sounds if we replace these with brass. Okay. Now, let's keep the piano where it is. I'm going to use Berlin brass for this because before I was using Berlin woodwinds. Let's see how it sounds with the brass. Now I'm thinking register wise, right? So I might do some things a little bit differently. So this flute has a very nice and tame sound, but let's start with the first trumpet. Let's put the trumpet there. Let's put in the second trumpet. We're kind of going to go through the same process here. So I'm just going to load in the instruments and then I'll see you in a second. All right, so we've gone through and actually replaced all the woodwinds with brass instruments. So instead of flutes 1 and 2, I've put in trumpet 1 and 2. Instead of oboes 1 and 2, I've put in horns 1 and 2. Instead of clarinets 1 and 2, I've put in trombones 1 and 2. Instead of 2 bassoons, I've put in a bass trombone. And I've also put in a tuba for the very last note at the very bottom. I was kind of choosing between, do I want tuba to play this first line and then the bass trombone to play the last note? But I decided on this configuration simply because the tuba has a slightly warmer tone, so it can really wrap everything up really nicely, almost like a hug for the very last chord. So I didn't do any tweaking whatsoever. And actually, this is my first time hearing this now. I'm going to play through and let's see if it sounds any different. Maybe it sounds worse or better. We'll find out. Let's have a listen. So I'm sure you would agree that's a beautiful sound. The only thing I might tweak here is the modulation just for the top trumpet. So where are we? Let's take a look at the top trumpet here. And the reason is because it's not really coming up enough for these high notes. And naturally, when you play higher on these brass woodwind instruments, they start to become a little bit louder. So we can also have that happen here naturally. And so the melody doesn't get lost. See if that works. See, now you can hear the B flat better. There we go. And then this one in this trumpet just below should be a little bit softer because he's the supporting instrument role there. Oops, not record, I just want to hear it. There we go. Cool. So this goes to show that it doesn't really matter what instrument section you're using. Woodwinds, brass. I did an earlier video last year with strings using a chorale style as well. Doesn't really matter what the section is, as long as you follow the rules of the harmonic series, where it's wider at the bottom and you use intervals that are like at octaves, perfect fifths, the occasional third, the higher up you go, and more colorful intervals at the top. Naturally, the balance will sound very, very smooth and very spread out. and balance. That's the key word, balance. Everything in music really is balance, right? So the only timbral difference is in like the way the instruments are constructed and the sounds they produce. They have a slightly warmer tone, maybe. Some have a more shrill sound. Some have a more harsh tone. But still, the distribution between the fundamental and then all the other partials above it, they all remain the same. It doesn't matter what instrument you're playing, as long as they're playing the same notes. The fundamental is the same. All the partials are the same. It's just the partial volumes that are a little bit different from instrument to instrument, from timbre to timbre. That's why we get different instruments sounding the way they do while playing the exact same note. So I hope this makes sense. And again, check out the MIDI file if you're interested in trying this out with strings as well. I definitely encourage you to do that. But in any case, yeah, thank you for watching this video. Before you go, I want to give you a gift. It's my 10 steps to writing clear orchestral music. It has tips about arranging, orchestration, mixing in there, all really practical stuff you can apply to your mockups right away just to get your next production sounding as good as possible. And leading into that, I also want to announce my very first independent online course that I've created, and it's called Cinematic Music Creation. It's coming out next week. I'm very, very excited about it, and I really can't just wait for you to see it. Basically, it's going to be a step-by-step approach of how I go through the composing, producing, orchestration, and mixing, mastering process to create a beautiful cinematic piece of music that is purely orchestral. So there's no sound design in it. It basically has to depend on arrangement, balance, voice leading, counterpoint, all that good stuff. And if you've ever felt frustrated or not unsure about how to proceed with orchestration or writing your ideas, this is something I think that's really, really going to help you. So more details on that next video next week. And yeah, just stay tuned for that. So hopefully this video helps you, gives you an idea of how you can apply the woodwinds and the brass to a chorale piece of music. But yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Hopefully this one helped you, and yeah, just take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.